wind was louder than the bell that morning. It came off the ocean in long, unbroken lines, lifting the flag above the football field and combing through the pines until everything benches, fences, my breath made a thin, metallic sound. Most people hurried inside. I didn't. I liked the noise the wind made in my head. It cleared space where thoughts could land without breaking. I sat on the lowest row of the bleachers with my sketchbook open and my guitar case napping against my knee. Senior year had started the way a song does when you only know the first chord, hopeful and a little afraid of the next note. "Is that seat taken?" Her voice cut across the wind like a warm thread. I looked up. She was new. You can tell by the way someone looks at a place, measuring it with their eyes. She had a navy cardigan over the uniform and a pale blue scarf wrapped twice around her wrist, like a promise she was trying not to forget. "It's a public bench," I said. "Highly democratic." She smiled and sat, careful to tuck the scarf's frayed edge into her sleeve. "I'm Lila," she said, as if the name had already belonged to this wind-swept corner, and she was just claiming it back. "Ethan," I said. "Holly, like the weather?" "Like the witch trials," I said, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry. I joke when I'm nervous." "Good," she said. "I like people who show their seams." For a moment we watched the flag snap at the mast. The wind made the field look like something alive, green skin shivering under a giant hand. I drew a fast line in my sketchbook, then another, trying to catch motion with graphite, like usual. It never works, but trying is part of the ritual. "Do you play?" she asked, nodding at the case. "When it's not too windy," I said. "And even when it is." "Play me something," she said, and it wasn't a dare, more like a request you say with both palms open. I tuned by feel. The first string was stubborn, but the wind softened for a few seconds, like it was listening. I played the thing I always played when words didn't show up, the unfinished one. A low walking progression that turned at the last second, like a street you keep meaning to take and never do. It didn't have a name. Most important things don't at first. When I stopped, the wind came back with a cold hand. Lila looked down at her scarf. "Finish it," she said, "before the season changes." "Which season?" I asked. "The scarf season," she said and laughed, but her eyes were a fraction tired, the way the ocean looks after a storm when the surface pretends to be calm. The bell rang. We didn't move. Staying still felt like an agreement. "You're going to be late," I said. I read somewhere that lateness is just time trying to be interesting. She stood, then paused. "Do you ever feel like this place wants you to say something before you leave it?" "All the time," I said, surprising myself with the truth. She nodded like that answer passed a test I didn't know I was taking. "See you, Ethan dash who dash plays dash and dash the dash wind." "See you, Lila with..." In English, a name can be anything. In memory, it becomes a door. At lunch, Maya found me in the cafeteria line staring at the soup like it might confess a secret. "You look like a ghost filing taxes," she said, tugging my sleeve toward the quieter end of the room. Maya sees everything through a lens, even without her camera, so her sentences come out already framed. "Met the new girl," I said. "Which one?" "There are at least 3 new girls, 2 new boys, and a ferret in the biolab." "Blue scarf," I said. Maya's eyebrows lifted. Ah, Lila Bennett. Guidance office whispered medical transfer when they handed me the press pass. She missed some months last year. You didn't hear it from me. The word medical rang the way metal does when it's struck thin and long. I felt my ear go tight the way it does before the ringing starts. I breathed through it. She's nice, I said too quickly. Maya watched my face like it was a developing photograph. Be careful with wind, she said. It moves things without asking. Thanks for the weather report, I said, but the soup had gone cold, and the room sounded like 1,000 forks learning to dance. After last period, Coach Willis made us run laps because the sky looked too dramatic for his taste. The wind turned my breath into short, white flags. When he finally blew the whistle, I walked back to the bleachers, the place where the day had started making sense. Lila was already there. She had her elbows on her knees and her chin in her hands, and the kind of stare you use for horizon lines. The scarf was around her wrist again, this time looser, like it had been unknotted by weather. You came back, she said. You say that like it's rare. It is, she said. People are good at leaving. I sat, placed the guitar case between us like a careful animal. Okay, which season exactly am I finishing this song for? She considered. For the one after now? She tilted her head at the field. Play the wind part first. There isn't a wind part. There is, she said. You just haven't named it. I listened. The flag, the pines, the metal rails, they had a shared key if you stood in the right spot and let your chest become a chamber. I found it. A D that wanted to be a G but kept remembering the salt. I played. The chords stepped like someone learning a dance, and then, on the fourth bar, turned and looked back. Lila's eyes did that soft focus thing that makes the world a room with only two people in it. When I ended, she didn't clap. She just breathed it out like the note had been hiding in her. Promise me one thing, she said. Dangerous opening. Promise you'll write the ending before the wind changes, she said. Some endings you don't get to pick. This one you do. I almost asked what she meant. Instead, I nodded. I promise. She smiled, the kind of smile people make when the contract is with themselves. Good. Then we have time. The sun slid behind a cloud, and the temperature dropped 2 honest degrees. Somewhere, a goal made the sound of a door closing. I didn't know it yet, but the promise was the whole story. Every promise is a clock, and somewhere in the gears a small hand had already started to move. The days that followed blurred together like watercolor left out in the rain. Classes, hallways, the smell of pencil shavings, all of it passed by in muted tones. But every time I saw that flash of pale blue at the edge of the crowd, something inside me steadied. Lila became a rhythm in the noise. She sat 2 rows over in English, sometimes twirling her pen, sometimes staring out the window, as if she were waiting for someone who only existed in her thoughts. I didn't talk to her much in class, but after school, somehow we always ended up at the bleachers again. It started to feel like our corner of the world, the wind, the metal benches, the thin line of sea at the horizon. She said it made her feel small in a good way. I said it made me want to write. Both were true. Play the same one, she'd say, and I'd pretend to complain before doing exactly that. Each time I changed one chord or one note or one breath in between, and she always noticed. "See? That one was sadder," she'd say. "I didn't mean to." Maybe songs know more than the people who write them. Her scarf changed, too. Some days she wore it around her neck, others tied to her bag, once even in her hair. But it was always there like a flag reminding the world that Lila Bennett existed, even when the world wasn't paying attention. One Friday afternoon, we skipped last period. She said it didn't count if you were chasing something beautiful. So we walked down the hill behind the football field until the grass turned to sand and the sky opened like a door. The beach was quiet except for the wind and the sound of our shoes dragging lazy lines in the sand. I drew a heart with my toe, half as a joke, but she bent down and traced over it with her scarf, pressing it into the wet ground. "Now it'll stay longer," she said, "until the tide comes in." I said, "Everything good disappears eventually," she whispered. "That's what makes it good." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and sat beside her. We stayed like that for hours, no music, no words, just the wind making us shiver in the same rhythm. At some point she asked, "Do you ever think about what people will remember you for?" I laughed. "I'm 17. I'm mostly trying not to fail math." She smiled but didn't answer. The scarf fluttered once, twice, then rested. When we finally stood, she handed me a folded piece of notebook paper. For the next verse, she said, it was a short poem, half finished like my song. "If the wind forgets my name, will the sea still carry my sound?" I wanted to ask what it meant. I wanted to ask a lot of things, but the bell from the school's far clock tower echoed over the hill 5 o'clock, and she looked at it like it had betrayed her. "I should go," she said. "See you tomorrow?" She hesitated. "Yeah, tomorrow." But when she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. The wind changed. It didn't stop, just turned colder, sharper, like a reminder that summer had been pretending too long. Lila started missing days. At first it was small, one absence, then 2. She always came back with the same half smile and an excuse that sounded like a verse from one of my songs. "Just a cold," she'd say. "Just tired." But her eyes began to carry something I couldn't name. The bleachers felt bigger without her. The notes I played fell flat, as if the wind had forgotten its part. Even the flag seemed to hang heavier, tired of waving for no one. Maya noticed before I said anything. "You're quieter than usual," she said one morning at her locker, which is saying a lot. "She's been gone," I said. "Then go find her. It's not that simple." "It never is," she said, snapping her camera shut. "But you'll wish you had." I did go. One afternoon after practice, I walked the familiar hill down toward the beach. The tide was high, erasing everything we'd left behind. No heart in the sand, no trace of blue. The wind hit my face like static. I sat where she had sat and tried to finish the song. I added a bridge, something quiet that rose and fell like breathing. But when I reached for the last chord, my left ear rang sharp, metallic, like the air itself had split open. I pressed my palm to the side of my head, waiting for it to fade. It didn't. The next day she returned. "Hey, stranger," she said, standing behind me while I retuned my guitar. I turned. Her scarf was gone. "You're late," I said. Fashionably, she smiled, but it was weaker. "You okay?" "Yeah." She sat down beside me, fingers laced together. "Just dizzy sometimes. Doctor says it's nothing." I wanted to believe that. She reached into her bag and handed me another folded paper, another poem. "If the song forgets its ending, will silence still know my name?" I stared at the words until they blurred. "You keep giving me riddles." "They're not riddles," she said softly. "They're pieces." "Of what?" "Of the wind." The bell rang in the distance. Neither of us moved. The air between us trembled, like it knew what was coming before we did. She looked at me then, eyes shining with something that wasn't quite light. "Ethan," she said, "when you finish it, promise me you'll play it somewhere loud enough for the sea to hear." I swallowed hard. "You'll be there to listen." She smiled, but her voice was a whisper. "Maybe." And then she stood up, her hair catching the last bit of sun before the cloud took it away. The next morning, her seat in English was empty again. Her absence stretched longer this time. A week passed, then another. The teachers stopped asking. Even Maya stopped teasing. The air around her empty desk felt heavy, like silence had a shape. I tried calling the number she once scribbled on my notebook, but it was disconnected. I walked past her locker more than I should have, pretending I was headed somewhere else. But one afternoon, when the hall was nearly empty and the late sun painted everything gold, I saw at her locker door slightly ajar. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe a note. Maybe proof she still existed in the same world as me. Inside were the usual things: a few textbooks, a cracked mirror, a small bottle of sand with a blue ribbon tied around it, and at the bottom a sealed envelope with my name written in her soft, slanted handwriting. Ethan. I opened it right there, the noise of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. If you're reading this, it means I had to go earlier than I thought. Don't be angry, I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole story. Sometimes the body forgets how to stay. Mine's been trying so hard. Promise me you'll keep playing, even when the wind changes. The song isn't about endings. It's about remembering. There was a smaller folded paper inside the letter, another poem. The wind will stop someday, but music doesn't need air to survive. I pressed the page against my chest, feeling the paper tremble with my pulse. For a second, I could almost hear her laugh, carried faintly through the hallway. Then something small fell from between the pages, a bracelet of thin blue thread, frayed at the edges. Her scarf unraveled. Maya found me there, sitting on the floor beside the open locker, the letter still in my hands. She didn't say anything at first, just crouched next to me, watching the light flicker on the tiles. "She's gone," I said quietly. "I know," Maya whispered. "I heard." "Heard what?" "She transferred again. Out of state. Her mom said it was for treatment." The word treatment hit me like cold rain. "Did she say how bad?" Maya shook her head. "Only that the wind wasn't good for her lungs anymore." I laughed, an ugly, broken sound. "The wind," I repeated, as if saying it would bring her back. Maya rested a hand on my shoulder. "Finish the song," she said. "Maybe she'll hear it wherever she is." That night I sat by my window, the letter open beside me. The sea was louder than usual, throwing its voice against the cliffs. I picked up the guitar, touched the strings, and began to play. For the first time, the melody didn't feel unfinished. It hurt, but it was whole. And when I closed my eyes, I could almost feel the wind pause, as if listening. Winter arrived quietly, like a song fading out instead of ending. By then, everything at school felt different. New posters on the walls, new faces in the hallways, the same wind but colder. I joined the broadcasting club. It wasn't about popularity. I just liked the way sound carried through the empty corridors after everyone left. There was something sacred about the hum of old speakers, the static between songs. It reminded me of the silence between heartbeats. Most afternoons I stayed behind to help record the winter concert announcements. Maya would wave from the doorway, camera hanging from her neck like a second pulse. "You're turning into a ghost with a microphone?" she'd tease. Maybe she was right. One evening, when the snow started tapping against the windows, I found an old tape labeled Instrumental Practice E. Halle. I didn't remember recording it. My handwriting looked unsteady, like I'd been shaking. Curious, I played it. At first, just wind the real kind, caught by accident. Then, faintly, my guitar. The same song, the unfinished one. Except now, it wasn't unfinished anymore. Someone, maybe me, maybe memory, had filled the spaces I never dared to. The melody climbed higher, steadier, and just before it faded, a soft voice whispered through the static. "For the one who plays when the wind stops." I froze. It wasn't my voice. I replayed the tape 3 times. Same thing. Same whisper. Same impossible ache. That night, I stayed late in the studio. The world outside was buried in white. Even the wind had gone quiet, as if listening through the glass. I set up the microphone, tuned the guitar, and began to record. "This is Ethan Halle," I said softly, my breath cloudy in front of me. "This song is for someone who once told me that good things disappear. She was right, but sometimes if you play them loud enough, they come back for a while." The red light blinked. I played the song one final time. Every chord felt heavier, warmer, like it was carrying something beyond me. And somewhere between verse and chorus, I swear the air moved, not a draft, not the heater, just a small, certain shift of wind. When the last note faded, the silence stayed. I didn't stop the tape. I just sat there, listening to the quiet. It felt full. The next morning, when I came to edit the audio, the tape had a second track I didn't record. It was just the sound of the ocean, low and endless. And then, a voice barely there singing a line I'd never written. "If the sea remembers." Then the wind never really stopped. The town hadn't changed much, same quiet streets, same peeling paint on the diner sign, same scent of salt in the air. But everything felt smaller, like the world had exhaled and forgotten to breathe back in. The high school stood at the edge of the hill, its windows reflecting the gray sea. The bleachers were still there too, rusted a little, the flag faded from red to the color of old brick. I sat where I used, a place where the wind first taught me to listen. The guitar case was new. The song inside it wasn't. I hadn't planned on coming back. It was an invitation from the school radio, alumni music broadcast, songs that stayed with us. Maya had sent it with a note that just said, "It's time." The studio smelled the same dust, coffee, and quiet ambition. Maya was there, older now, her hair tied back, the same camera resting beside her. "You nervous?" she asked. "Always," I said. She smiled. "Good. That means you still care." I placed the old tape deck on the table. The label was fading, but I could still read it. Instrumental Practice E. Howie. It had followed me everywhere, through cities, jobs, relationships, but I'd never played it in public. Until now. When I pressed play, the speakers crackled, and the same wind filled the room. Then the guitar began, my younger self, fumbling through chords, the same fragile melody. And after a few minutes, her voice again, for the one who plays when the wind stops. Maya's eyes widened. "Who's that?" I smiled. "A girl who believed in unfinished songs." The music faded. I took the microphone. "This is for her," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "For Lila Bennett. For the wind that never stopped, just learned to move differently." I played the song one last time. It wasn't perfect. It didn't have to be. Every string carried a memory, the laughter, the silence, the sea swallowing our footprints. And somewhere between the second and third verse, the studio lights flickered. A soft breeze moved through the room. Not from the vents, not from outside. It was gentle, warm, like a sigh that had traveled a long way just to reach me. The last chord lingered, trembling in the air, then disappeared. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then quietly the wind stopped. And in that silence I finally understood. She hadn't left. She had become the wind.